That's awesome. Is it mostly Boston Cyclists Union? Okay. All right, thank you. Livable Streets? Livable Streets, yeah. Any others then? What are the other big ones in town? Mass Bike, of course. Sorry. Cambridge Bicycling. Oh, really? That's a good fight. You guys said the same thing? Cambridge Pedestrian Committee? Is that what you guys both said? Oh, a city thing. Okay. Cool. And then how many people are from the Harvard community? Great. MIT? Very nice. Any others? Any other like groups? Oh, Phineas.
I'm with U.S. Public Interest Research Group.
Okay. Yeah, Phineas Baxendall does the transportation work at US PERG. Oh, did you have one? Very cool. Okay, so we were hoping today that we could have a kind of sort of informal conversational thing happening here. We are going to sort of PowerPoint you to death, and this room is very sort of, much built for lecturing, but you guys should really feel free at any time to jump in, cut one of us off, ask a question. We're really hoping that this can be a discussion. And primarily, it's also meant to be a kind of workshop. This is Clarence Eckerson, who runs streetfilms.org. This is Ben Freed, who runs streetsblog.org. These are my former colleagues. I used to work with them before I started this Loeb Fellowship here at Harvard. These guys, all three of us, but these guys are like still in the thick of it, have incredible knowledge about how to use the internet and social media tools for just general messaging, for advocacy-oriented journalism, I guess is what you'd call it. And their presentations are very much oriented towards trying to help people figure out how to use these tools, in a similar fashion. So that I was going to do just a little bit of an intro, show you some pictures to give you a sense of the kind of work that we've been doing and the kind of advocacy that we're involved in. And then just a few thoughts on social media in general. The agenda for today, if you can see that, is roughly this. I'm just going to do an intro. Ben is going to go into blogging at about 10:30, probably more like 10:45 now. Clarence is going to do what he calls Street Films University, which is, even if you're not planning on picking up a video camera and going out and doing your own video, it's super entertaining and interesting. And then we have a lunch planned over in the pit across the hall there. And we'll see how it feels, but maybe there'll be a little time for Q&A after each one of us goes, Q&A while we're going. We could talk some more here if we want, or we could bring the discussion into the other room. So we'll see how it goes here. Yes. Oh. All right. Sorry. Yeah. Public health. Public health is actually a big part of what we've been doing. So let's see. So that's the agenda. I don't know. Any other questions or comments or? Did you have one? No. Okay. Sorry. All right. Yep. Oh, and then I also, all right. So what I'm going to do now basically is we're going to go over a little bit of what Livable Streets Advocacy is all about. And I'm going to try to sort of touch on a couple of concepts around how social media is being used for advocacy these days and how it's changing advocacy. So why don't we do the lights? Okay. Okay, so this is Streets blog. This is just a screenshot. And, you know, if you can, some of you are probably online now, and you should feel free to go over to streetsblog.org. Streetsblog is a website that I started developing in 2005 with funding and support from a pretty remarkable guy named Mark Gorton, Gorton, who is a hedge fund manager in New York City, and also a sort of serial entrepreneur. He ran a music file sharing service called LimeWire that was recently shut down by the recording industry, and in a humongous lawsuit, I'll say. And Mark is super interested in this whole set of issues around livable streets just from a very personal perspective. You know, why can't I walk down the street without worrying that my kids are going to get run over by a car, you know, if they make some single little wrong move? Why can't I bike to my office without worrying that, you know, I'm going to get mowed over? And so, you know, Mark was very interested in this whole set of issues and began putting money into the set of issues in the early 2000s. He started, you know, talking to people at Transportation Alternatives, which in New York City is the local bike and ped advocacy group. And I was working as a journalist, as a freelance journalist, and also an interactive media producer. And I had pitched a story to New York Magazine about Mark and about this nascent sort of campaign that was emerging at the beginning of Bloomberg's second term to try to rethink transportation. And Streets blog sort of emerged from that pitch, in that I went to interview Mark for the magazine article, and I was like, you know, I should actually come back to this guy and pitch him the idea of just doing a blog on this entire set of issues, you know, because I felt like there was stuff that I could write about every day. So now Ben Fried runs Streets blog, and Streets blog writes about this stuff every day. Formally, there are issues or editions of Streets blog in San Francisco, Los Angeles. And there's a national network that combines a lot of other blogs, because just about every big city, DC, we're doing a federal Streets blog as well. But just about every small city or town has one of these now, somebody writing about transportation and urban planning issues. This is a screenshot of street films showing Gabe Klein, the commissioner of the Chicago DOT. Clarence has been running street films and actually doing sort of bike-related video work for a really, like 15 years now, Clarence? Yeah. And I mean, really doing this, he started doing it through cable access television, doing an amazing show called Bike TV. And, you know, as with my stuff, Clarence's work evolved into street films. It was, at first he was, Mark Gorton had hired Clarence to do kind of one-off videos. And, you know, I was getting the blog up and running, and we were sort of like, well, we should obviously be using the blog to distribute these videos. You know, let's call them street films. And street films has emerged as an incredibly powerful tool for really just sort of sharing ideas. And you can, and Clarence has an incredible skill at taking very wonky, potentially complicated policy concepts, like parking policy, which can be super boring and wonky. And he can take that, and his crew can take that, and turn it into something like a 3 to 8 minute video that people really want to watch. And then just by the nature of the medium, that video ends up, it has a huge life of its own. These videos just travel around. I mean, how many people have seen a street film? Just, okay, so you guys know. They just get passed around. The blog and street films started as part of this New York City Streets Renaissance campaign. And this was launched in 2006. Again, Mark Gorton was mostly funding it. But Paul Steely-White, the executive director at Transportation Alternatives, was really doing a lot of the kind of coordinating and organizing. So you'll note right off the bat there, you know, we're not talking just about some sort of like spontaneous web uprising, as is often, you know, sort of these kinds of like Twitter revolutions and Facebook revolutions are often portrayed as that. There was some established advocacy organizations involved in this from the beginning. The goal of the Streets Renaissance campaign was largely to sort of get New Yorkers to start to re-envision what their streets and public spaces could be. We started bringing in all kinds of different experts into New York City. Enrique Peñalosa, the mayor of Bogota, Jan Gehl, a Danish urban designer. Donald Shoup is a parking guru from the University of California, Los Angeles. And we started putting these guys in front of different audiences in New York. And Streets Blog and Street Films were essential in making sure that the content that these guys delivered stuck around, you know? So you could put Donald Shoup in front of a business improvement district group, a kind of small local group in Midtown Manhattan. And, you know, he's only going to talk to 30 people. But if you have a blog or you have a video website, you know, you can save that content. And then it becomes something that people refer to, not just in Midtown and Manhattan, not just in New York City, but all over the country, you know, over and over again. So right off the bat, the New York City Streets Renaissance campaign was sort of supercharged by these social media and web tools in a way that I think surprised all of us. You know, it wasn't something that we necessarily expected would happen. But, you know, we were sort of learning how to use these tools as well. A little bit more about the advocacy. So, you know, this is what New York City looks like sometimes still today, not just in 2005. But there was a general feeling among a lot of different players during that time that New York City streets and public spaces had been just neglected for a long time, that there really hadn't been any new ideas. There'd been no renovation really since probably the 50s when the elevated train lines started coming down and the streetcars started disappearing. And we started retrofitting the city for the automobile. There were a lot of different players that wanted to do something about that. And there was a sense that, you know, the city had kind of forgotten, you know, that the streets weren't always just for automobiles. This is a favorite picture of mine of Park Avenue. Before 1922 and after 1922, Park Avenue was once actually a park. Jane Jacobs describes it really nicely. She calls it a kind of nibbling that took place throughout most of the 20th century, where, you know, you can see in this photo of Madison Avenue up in the 70s, around 78th, or sorry, at 89th Street. I'm sorry, this is Lexington Ave at 89th Street. You see that the sidewalks were substantially chipped back. You see the front stoops were sheared off of the buildings. And this is just one block in one city, but this is a process that took place all over America and cities all across the country, where we retrofitted our cities for the automobile and the motor vehicle. And in the process, you know, we in some ways substantially undermined neighborhood life and community life. And there's some great studies on this that came from a guy named Donald Appleyard, who essentially, you know, is where the guy we stole the name of our movement from. He wrote a book in 1982 called Livable Streets that studies how, you know, on heavy traffic streets, you tend to have less community life than on light traffic streets. And he sort of measured those effects. But, you know, city streets were once busy, teeming places. They were considered public spaces. And if you look back at newspaper articles from the 20s and 30s, you see these amazing stories where city dwellers all across America are really, you know, freaking out about the advent of the automobile. There's a guy named Peter Norton at the University of Virginia who wrote a book called Fighting Traffic, which is a little bit academic, but I highly recommend. He basically went through and researched all these old stories about the advent of the automobile. And in a lot of ways, it reminds you of this sort of similar backlash that's taking place in some spots when it comes to putting bike lanes into the city. Except in those days, there was an incredible carnage associated with the introduction of the car. And most of the dead people on the city streets were actually children, because it was kids who were, you know, playing out in the street, hanging out in the street back in those days. In 2007, we had a substantial break with what had essentially been 75 to 80 years of policy oriented towards the automobile. And Streets Blog and Street Films can take some credit, and the Streets Renaissance campaign can take some credit for making this happen. One of the interesting things that I was hearing when the previous DOT commissioner, the one before Jeanette Sadiq-Khan here, resigned was that Streets Blog had made the previous DOT commissioner's job a lot less pleasant. And this is sort of a point of pride. One of the goals of the blog was to kind of cover this set of issues that we felt like had been neglected, and to sort of watchdog the transportation agency in a way that, frankly, I mean, you can't even blame the New York Times or the Daily News. They don't have the resources, on paper and ink to devote to, writing about DOT issues every day. But you can do that on a blog. And theoretically, I mean, maybe some of you guys aren't interested in transportation. You could do that on an education beat. You could do that with, you could do garbage blog. You could write about your sanitation department or your local government in general. You could do this with any topic. After Jeanette Sadiq-Khan came in, we started to see a lot of changes like this. We started to see, small parking lots that had been kind of trash-strewn, little wasted public spaces, turned into small public plazas managed by community groups, like this one in the neighborhood called Dumbo in Brooklyn. We started to see busy intersections being redesigned to make conditions a lot better for pedestrians, and also giving people places to sit. You'll notice in these pictures that you see a lot of temporary materials being used. You see kind of flimsy chairs and tables and umbrellas being put out. This is Madison Square, 23rd Street and Broadway, Manhattan. And what's interesting about this stuff is that you can do these kinds of changes very cheaply and quickly. And they don't need to be big capital projects. You can test an idea. You can experiment and see if something works, and if it doesn't, you can change it later. And then if it works really well, you can sort of build it out as a fancier, nicer capital project. And one of the things that's interesting to me about this is that this is very much of a concept that's stolen from the web and from software development, right? And it's not a coincidence that Jeanette Sadiq-Khan comes from the sort of corporate world. She's a product development and marketing person, and a lot of her staff, the people who are implementing this stuff, are under 40s and under 30s. They're younger people who come from and live in this sort of social media software world. And they're comfortable with this idea that, when you're making a new product, especially online, you throw the product out to people and let them use it for a while and see what happens and then change accordingly. There's a school of thought now, I'll go just before I get to that, there's a school of thought now called agile development or lean development. Is anyone here familiar with those terms? Okay, yeah, so some folks are. Basically, what you're seeing now in a lot of, I'll give you an example. A friend of mine runs a small software startup in Manhattan where he's doing stuff. His company is called Sulia. And he's got a crew of about 5 software developers. And they're trying to essentially make it easier to find your way into a social media site like Twitter. It doesn't really matter what the company's about. But what my friend Jonathan was telling me the other day, he's like, I've got 5 incredibly talented software developers. And if a project takes them more than a week, they start to freak out. These guys their adherence to this agile development philosophy in a very intense way. So basically what they want to do is they want to spend a short amount of time developing a feature. They want to put the feature online and they want to get feedback. They want to see how the feature gets used. And then they want to develop the next product. And they want to collect data. They want to analyze data. And they want to develop the next project based on what they learned from that experiment. You even see this happening on places like the Huffington Post. Well, you don't really see it, but what the Huffington Post is often doing is you guys could all hit the Huffington Post at the same time, and there'd be 5 different headlines being served to you randomly to people in this room. The Huffington Post, which gets its ad money based on clicks, will see, who clicks on a headline and which headline gets the most clicks, and then half an hour later, every headline on the HuffPo, that post will have the headline that got the most clicks. So it's a very quick development process. And what's happening in New York City and increasingly in other cities is this agile process is being applied to how we think about the urban interface, right? Because, what is a city after all, except it's sort of the original internet. It's a medium that we created so that we could exchange information, we could be together, we could interact, we could exchange goods and services. So other innovations in New York City. It's not just about public spaces, it's also about buses. We've got this new select bus service, which is, I think, in some ways the most radical and kind of unheralded project that's underway now. Dedicated bus lanes, you can pay outside the bus. This is a project that Open Plans, which is the publisher of Streets Blog and Street Films, actually developed. And I was involved in the startup talks for this, but it's a real-time bus tracking system. And the MTA had spent tens of millions of dollars trying to get big engineering firms to help them do real-time bus tracking. Open Plans did it with open source software and essentially cell phones.
Took the MTA 12 years. They spent so much time before Open Plans.
To people that took the MTA 12 years to do real-time bus stuff, and Open Plans did this. Actually, Open Plans had to threaten to sue the MTA because they were not even willing to share their bus schedule data, which was public. So there was some of that, but once the process got rolling, how long did it take, Ben? It was like a year or less. It was like 8 months.
Really fast. Less than a year.
It was an extraordinarily. Essentially the project is an iPhone on every bus. Yeah, well, they're expanding it to Staten Island. They just announced yesterday or the day before. Yeah, people are very happy with the results. It really actually works.
So you went from being very skeptical and we don't want you to, this is good.
It wasn't even skepticism. It was just this sort of reflexive.
The old way of thinking.
Yeah, it was the old way of thinking. It was this bureaucratic, reflexive, we don't share our scheduling data with outsiders, But the chair of the MTA, he liked this stuff. He's gone now, but Jay Walder was very much in favor of, doing projects like this. But we weren't talking to Jay Walder. Yes.
The contrast is with the MBTA here, where they put the data out there, all the developers' data, all the people, and had it bring it back in hours.
That's right.
And just put the stuff out there.
Yeah, that's an amazing story that the MBTA here in Boston is just sort of letting developers use the data. Are we doing that in New York yet, guys?
We have a street film on that, too.
Okay, there's a great street film. Yeah. Can people hear? You should probably speak up and talk to the...
Open Plans.
Yeah, sorry. So Open Plans is Mark Gorton's nonprofit organization. So for example, when I came in to start doing Streets Blog, I essentially became an Open Plans employee. And Open Plans is doing not just Streets Blog and Street Films, but they have a sub-organization called OpenGeo, which does open source mapping. It's kind of open source Google mapping type of software. And they have, what are we calling the other group now? CivicWorks?
Yeah.
And then CivicWorks does projects like this. So it's a really interesting software company dedicated to kind of open source, nonprofit, using software to sort of change the way governments function and enhancing sort of citizen participation. And then of course there's the bike story in New York, which has been really interesting. Huge build out of the bike network, lots of new street designs that make it safer for people like these, little kids, older people, more not just like kind of young men are biking now. It's a much more mainstream activity. We're seeing really substantial redesigns of big prominent streets. This is First Avenue in Manhattan, and you see the sort of the car lanes have been squeezed. One has been sort of eliminated, but there's still 3 car lanes, and you got a protected bike lane on the left and a dedicated bus lane on the right. So essentially, street space is just being reallocated. And the result, one of the most interesting results, if you haven't been down to New York City in a while, is bike usage is just skyrocketing. It's increased 26% between 2008 and 2009. And kind of the numbers have been along those lines just about every year, and essentially has doubled since 2005. So this little, yes. Oh, sorry.
That's great data. Is that New York City transportation?
Yeah, so this is these are the screen line counts that DOT runs, and basically it's really only useful as a kind of relative measure in that they have these screen lines at different locations, like the East River Bridges and the Hudson River Greenway, and basically every year they'll go out at the same time and take a series of counts and then compare year to year. So that's what that is. Actually, the bike count data could be a lot better in New York, and I think they're trying to figure out how to do that, but we're pretty dependent on these screen lines now. Yes?
Peter, you showed a picture of the Prospect Park bike lane, and I think that's something that a lot of us who don't live in New York City know about because of stories in the Times and New York and so on,
Mhm.
opposition to it by well-connected, politically well-connected, wealthy people who were bitterly opposed to it because apparently it took away some of their precious parking spaces, and one of the opponents was Senator Schumer's wife.
Yes. Yeah, and also the previous DOT commissioner. She's Senator Schumer's wife and the previous DOT commissioner. Yeah. Yeah, this was an extremely controversial project, and there really has been a kind of what I like to call the bike lash, in recent, in the 2010 and 11, Streets blog was very, there was a lot of coverage of this issue, and Ben spent a huge amount of his time, and hopefully he'll talk about this. Actually, he will talk about this, I know. Just sort of covering the bike lash and trying to get accurate information out into a media environment that was really kind of high strung on the bike issue, and also very willing to sort of just kind of put garbage out there. And actually, this is one of the interesting things. Well, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I guess what I was going to say is this is one of the interesting things about also social media is that the Prospect Park West bike fight was, I think, the first instance where our side, the livable street side, which had been so good at using social media for advocacy, all of a sudden we were up against this other set of opponents who were also now using social media. So they would launch a Facebook group, and all of a sudden there's 500 people in this Facebook group. So and actually this was happening in my neighborhood, and I had done a lot of the grassroots organizing to kind of get this project done over a course of a few years. So I felt a big response. I was like, all right, well, we got to launch a Facebook group too. And fortunately, we would get a couple thousand people in our group. So we were always sort of bigger than them. But it was really interesting to see how, from the other side of this, that, for example, a woman, her name was Leslie Sicklick, and she kind of made a splash in the media a summer or two ago because she was protesting the First and Second Avenue bike lanes in Manhattan. And it was just, she had essentially sort of put together a little group name and sent out a press release and used email, and all of a sudden she had a rally and she had press coverage. And if you're kind of in the midst of a hot issue, it really doesn't take much anymore to kind of generate your own, even though there was more press at her rally than there were actual participants, it was sort of taken seriously. It was part of the story. I wanted to give you a sense that it's not just New York City, that where this movement is taking place. I think it's sort of a under-discussed movement. You've got it going on in London, car-free Trafalgar Square, congestion pricing. Paris, the expressway, the Pompidou Expressway is been turned into a beach. It's a very successful project in the summers. Bike sharing is happening all over the place, including here in Boston and soon Cambridge, I understand. Urban expressways are coming down. This project in Seoul, South Korea was extraordinarily successful, an elevated highway in the middle of the city. Bus rapid transit, Transmilenio in Bogota is the model for a lot. Copenhagen is the model for a lot of the biking that's taking place, bike ideas that are taking place. And a lot of this stuff now is spreading via social media. So I don't want to take too much more time here. But any other quick questions about the livable street stuff? I think Ben and Clarence are going to touch on a lot of it. So let's just talk about the social media piece just really quickly. And hopefully that can be more of the discussion later too. There's really four things that social media, I think, is doing to advocacy and political organizing. And I kind of put these in economic terms. The internet and social media are reducing the cost. They're reducing the cost of four things that are very essential to advocates and others, but advocates is who we're talking about. Reducing the cost of access to information, of group communication, group coordination, and public documentation. Okay? I'm stealing some of this from Clay Shirky, who's a fellow Brooklynite and a professor at NYU. Who writes about this stuff and is really smart, but also just from my own experiences. There's this debate kind of raging right now, and I realized as I sort of agreed to do this topic and then started to, think about my presentation here, and I was like, oh my God, I've bitten off a PhD dissertation or something. I've bitten off 100 PhD dissertations. But this question of whether or not the social media tools are really, changing anything. There's sort of this argument out there that was put forward by Malcolm Gladwell in the New Yorker a few months ago that, look, is the Bolshevik Revolution was aided by the telegraph. The fall of the Iron Curtain was aided by the fax machine and the VCR. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 was aided by, the cassette recorder. There's stuff that people write about this. And at the time, we were very smitten by these ideas. But now this is just sort of an academic footnote that's interesting to media theorists and professors and stuff. And so some people are arguing that this social media revolution is just that. I tend to disagree. I don't think I'm totally there. I think that, as someone who does advocacy, sure, it's, social media is good for some laughs. But I wanted to share with you just a couple of, I thought the best way to try to talk about this and get a grasp on this was to give you just a couple examples from my own advocacy work. One of the first campaigns I worked on with Clarence, actually, in 2002, was this Car-Free Prospect Park campaign. And we went out and we collected 10,000 signatures in Brooklyn to try to get Prospect Park made into a car-free place. And we can't, I was sort of I was hired actually by TA, Transportation Alternatives, to coordinate the campaign. I came back to the TA office with 10,000, after a number of weeks of going out in the park and with a bunch of other volunteers and collecting signatures. I had 11,000 cards. And I wanted to take these cards and divide them up and give them to each council member with a district touching the park. There were 5 different council members touching the park. And I'm sitting there staring at the stack of cards, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be, so we're going to need to get a bunch of volunteers. We're going to have to maybe do a pizza night, maybe even 2. We'll divide up these cards. We'll go hand, each one by hand and sort of look up the council member's district for each address on the card. And actually, we had already put everything in a spreadsheet, so that was done too. So it wasn't that hard. But I was like, well, this stuff is in a spreadsheet already. Why don't I call Steve O'Neill, who was a computer programmer who was out doing signature collection with me? And I said, and there was a website that NYPIRG ran, which is part of Phineas's organization. And NYPIRG had a find your own elected official website. And I called Steve and I said, Steve, could you write a script that would take these 10,000 addresses and automatically submit them to the NYPIRG website? And Steve was like, yeah, that would be the easiest thing in the world to do. So he did it. We started running the script. We crashed NYPIRG's entire server. We shut down everything of theirs. They got furious at us, but then they let us, as long as we spaced it out a little bit, they let us do it. And it was my first example, and this is 2002, keep in mind, this is Mark Zuckerberg is in high school, Flickr, the founders of Flickr still think that they're developing an online game, okay? Not a photo sharing service. Twitter is totally non-existent. So it's just sort of the dawn of Web 2.0 of social media, but I get this inkling that this set of tools could be a little bit like the assembly line, the Ford assembly line for advocacy. Now, if I was smart, I would have gone and started this company, who essentially now provide these tools to any advocate or change maker out there. The Salsa Labs, they have a really good tool set that does that stuff. And then in 2007, and this was really sort of one of my first inklings of the power of Streets blog, was this campaign in Park Slope where the traffic engineer, New York City's chief traffic engineer, this guy Mike Primigia, had come in very quietly into some backroom meetings at the borough president's office and said, we want to turn these pedestrian-friendly commercial streets in Park Slope, Brooklyn, into one-way, kind of what we perceived as mini highways. Sort of streets more designed to shoot cars up and down the avenue than to sort of, be a kind of pedestrian-friendly shopping corridor. And I got a hold of Primigia's plan, which here's just it was on Xerox copy, and it was the kind of thing, it was not public yet. It was sort of being, floated to sort of the borough president. And I just put it online. I put the plan up on the blog, and I shot some links out to other local blogs who loved it, and they picked it up. And pretty immediately, the third thing I did was after this went online, I started getting contacted by people who were sort of professional planners and engineers, which I am not. And they were saying, hey, this guy Primigia, all his stuff is based on these studies from the 70s. It's this stuff has been debunked and we're way past that. There's studies from the 90s and 2000s that show that two-way streets are in fact safer and more pedestrian friendly and more business friendly. And, based on new studies, you wouldn't change these streets. And so I put that stuff online too. And 700 people showed up to this meeting. This was a community board meeting that you would normally expect 15 people to show up to, and the traffic engineer would sort of quietly, talk about the plan, and it would be done, and that would be that. 700 people showed up to this thing. And it was really unprecedented to some extent, and it was entirely blog and web driven. Another project was uncivilservants.org, which is a favorite of mine. In 2006, Transportation Alternatives had issued this report about government employee parking in Lower Manhattan. And basically after 2001, after September 11th, this problem exploded in Lower Manhattan, where you had all these new government officials sort of down there, and it was sort of chaos anyways, and everybody just sort of parked where they wanted. And after the cleanup of September 11th, it just kind of continued, and it got worse. And you could go down a street in Soho, like a really pretty little Soho street like Crosby, and go down and look at the placards on the dashboards, many of which were actually fake or expired. And every single car is just the personal vehicle of a government employee. And TA had done this great study, and it showed that this was essentially a $46 million a year parking perk, the sort of lost meter revenue, that there were so many government employees driving and parking in Lower Manhattan because of the free parking, that government employees created their own amount of traffic congestion that was substantially measurable over the East River bridges. And local people were furious about this. And not just in Lower Manhattan, but in government centers in all 5 boroughs. So there was a guy named Greg Whalen from Meetup.com. He was one of the founders of Meetup. And he had created a website called My Bike Lane, where it was his own little personal project where he was taking photos. It was a photo sharing service where you could take a photo of a car blocking a bike lane and you could submit it. And it would be online and it would be mapped and the license plate number would be tracked so you could sort of track repeat offenders. And I went to Greg and I was like, hey, do you think you could just rewrite My Bike Lane into uncivilservants.org? Because there were folks in the communities that were walking up to Matthew Roth at Transportation Alternatives and handing him photo albums and just being like, look, I've got photos of all these illegally parked, court officers and police guys and firemen and they're parking in front of their own fire hydrants. And, local people were just really worked up about this. So we essentially turned it into a kind of version of Flickr, where people could upload their own photos of illegally parked it mostly was cops, but government employees. And just the presence of this website was such a great story that as simply as a kind of press release, it was massively successful. But it was also, to me, an example of this kind of group coordination that just didn't exist before the web. You couldn't really share, a sort of geographically dispersed group of people couldn't really share photos like this. And ultimately, about a year later, it led to substantial cuts in parking placards. Not that the problem is totally solved, but there's about 32% fewer official placards on the street, and the system is better. So that's a group coordination example, but it's kind of complicated. It's probably not something that you can build yourself. So I want to point you to Bike NYC as well. This is something you'll find on Twitter. You'll also find hashtag BikeBOS. Another example of group coordination, group communication, where the costs of a group talking to each other have just been massively driven down. When you do a tweet, you can add this hashtag to your tweet. And now all of a sudden, anyone in the Bike NYC community, because that hashtag essentially represents a community now, will see your tweet. It's a way of finding a discussion and inserting yourself into a kind of ongoing conversation. Hard to remember what it was like in the world before email, but it was actually quite costly and difficult for a group to have a conversation like this, for a dispersed group of disorganized individuals. You often had to go through an organization like Transportation Alternatives if you wanted to engage in the Bike NYC discussion. So this set of tools has completely, absolutely driven down the cost of a group discussion, And I don't know if if you can even remember what it was like before 1993 when, you started using email. Just 2 more little examples. This is a great one. Clarence did a video about Bogota's Cyclovia program. It's a car-free streets program that they do every Sunday down there. And advocates in other cities wanted this program as well. And so they began to lobby for it in different governments. And in San Francisco, the advocates were having no success getting to Gavin Newsom, the mayor there, until eventually the sustainability czar in San Francisco said, Mayor Newsom, just sit down in front of this laptop for 3 minutes. I'm going to show you a video. They started playing this video. And 2 minutes into the video, Gavin Newsom is like, okay, I get it. Let's do the Sunday Streets thing. And suddenly San Francisco has a new kind of car-free street event every Sunday. The video itself went totally viral and inspired cyclovia type events in how many cities, Clarence? We don't even know, but Baltimore for sure, Portland, Oregon, Chicago,
Los Angeles,
LA, absolutely. So again, something that wasn't really very possible. I suppose we could have done a DVD in, or no, they were called CD-ROMs, right? well, VCR tape, and passed it around to different advocates. But this just exists, and people can use it themselves. It's not like Clarence sent this to Baltimore advocates. So again, social media driving down this cost of group communication, spreading of ideas. And then finally, there's this idea. 2005, Rebar Group, a group of public artists in San Francisco, decide they're going to take one parking space on the street and turn it into a park, okay? Kind of a cute project, right? And it gets this great photo emerges, and I remember I'm basically sitting in front of my computer when this came out, like September 2005, and I was like, oh my God, that's such an awesome idea. I love it. Like just sticking quarters in a parking meter and saying, instead of a car here, we're going to make this into a park. And, it even has the same word, parking spot. That's great. So, I put it up on my blog, as did hundreds of other people. And all of a sudden, a kind of mini movement was born, all right? And by the way, one interesting thing, that Rebar spot is generally considered the first parking day spot ever, but it's not. These guys in Oxford, England, were kind of like, wait a second, we did it in 2003. We made our street into a living room and, watched Wimbledon on the TV, on the telly. Okay, but what's the difference between 2003 and 2005 and what these guys did in Rebar? These guys didn't put it on the web, okay? And maybe the web didn't exist in a format yet, in a kind of viral enough social media format that these guys could be credited with it. So basically, if you've done anything before 2005 that you want to be named as the first of, get it online right now. But bottom line, this was the next year, we did our own. That's my now 7-year-old son sitting on the curb. And we did our own in Brooklyn, our little public space reclamation in progress. And by 2010, there were 850 parks in 183 cities all across the world. Midtown Manhattan, Indianapolis, Krakow, Buenos Aires, India, Brookline. So this thing spread like crazy. Cambridge, yes, sorry. I couldn't find a good picture of Cambridge. That was all. And of course, the San Francisco guys kept upping the ante. They actually did a parksicle, just turned a car into a park. But it wasn't just an art project. It actually led to substantial policy change. So San Francisco, actually working with the Rebar Group, partly, started this parklets, this pavement to parks concept. And now you go to San Francisco, and there's these little parklets all over the place. New York City did a similar thing. So you go to little restaurants in parts of Lower Manhattan or Midtown, and you can find these kind of movable, basically parking spots. So what was interesting about what the Rebar guys did is they saw that their project was popular, and they took an idea from the software world. They said, we're just going to open source this thing. We're going to basically turn this into a project that anyone can do themselves. And they documented it. And they did this very purposely. They said, we're going to put this up online in a way. We're going to put up instructions, show you what we did. We're not going to say that this is the only way to do it. But they basically open sourced, the street. And anybody could kind of then tweak that project and develop their own version of it. And in fact, city governments have gone and, taken the idea one step further. Okay, except for anyone who was at my introduction presentation, Jim, Sally, does anyone recognize this urban public space? Anyone want to guess what space this is? No guesses? It's in Cairo. Lately it's looked like that. Okay. Before it looked like that, it looked like this. It was the most notorious kind of traffic choke point. One of them at Cairo has awful traffic. But this is the sort of the PhD part that and I think this is for later discussion, because I'm not even sure I've put together my own thoughts on this completely. But just to kind of conclude this thing, there's this really interesting connection that you see where these kind of little revolutions or big revolutions, whatever they are, that are happening from Occupy Wall Street to Tahrir Square to Bahrain, they're fights over public space, right? I mean, they're being pitched as fights over public space, of reclaiming public space, okay? So presumably this is a kind of authoritarian public space, right? And this is a public space for the 99%, for the people. Or that's what the sort of the argument, kind of how it gets framed. And in a funny way, it's very similar to the livable streets argument. You know, I recognize this as the fight that we've been having. You know, like, let's reclaim. I mean, Transportation Alternatives magazine is now called Reclaim, okay? Let's reclaim some of our urban space from the automobile and give it back to human beings and different non-motorized users. And if you think about, you know, the medium is the message, if you believe that kind of Marshall McLuhan idea, the medium is the message. And if you're willing to sort of go with me on the next step and say, all right, the city is a medium that facilitates interactivity and facilitates exchange, just like the internet, then what kind of message is this medium giving you, looking at Tahrir Square when it's full of traffic? Well, the citizens are stuck. They're immobilized. There's no mobility here, transportation-wise, and metaphorically, maybe not socially either, or politically. The citizens are in competition with each other here for space. Everybody's sitting in their own little box, isolated from one another. They can't really communicate except by going, honking their horn, right? That's how we communicate with each other in our cars. The citizens are inching forward, all facing in the same direction. Okay, they're like getting angry at each other, like, how dare you take an inch? I wanted to take that inch. You know how you get in your car when you're in traffic. So this public space, like this kind of car-oriented traffic choke public space, it puts citizens in a kind of very competitive, angry, dysfunctional, non-cooperative place with each other. This public space is very different, obviously. And I think what's happening, and again, this is the PhD topic, I think one of the things we're seeing, one of the reasons why we're seeing these little revolutions taking place in public spaces is because there's a generation of people, and all of us are essentially included in it, if we've been living with a smartphone for more than a couple of years, or Twitter or Facebook, where what's the message that social media gives? What's the message of that medium? The message is, if you share with other people in the media, you benefit, okay? If you're more open with your information, if you're collaborative, if you are kind of, if you're giving yourself to the medium, you get more back. That's essentially the message of social media. I mean, think about it. If nobody bothers to post their photos on Facebook, Facebook is pretty drab place. But if people are sharing, other people are encouraged to share. I think something's happening right now where these ideas of social media are being taken out to the street. And and people are coming out into public space and they're saying, wait a second. And I think this is particularly powerful in an authoritarian regime, which we don't live in, where they're saying, wait a second. We see from our software development processes, we see from our social media tools and toys that we can be productive. We can collaborate. We can make really great things without sort of an authoritarian, centralized, top-down system. It's possible to do that. So why is our street, why is our government so different? Why isn't it allowing us to have that same kind of relationship? We want that here too. We want that here in public space too. So that's my theory. Social media and the internet is now sort of having a profound impact on the city, on public space, on government. That, when the internet started, it was very much the spatial metaphor, right? The internet, we go to a space, we go to a site. We called them websites just almost automatically. It was a metaphor that Tim Berners-Lee, the www founder, kind of picked up on. This is going to be a website. But now I think, so we took these spatial metaphors and applied them to our information in the mid-90s. And I think something is happening in reverse now, where we're taking these social media ideas and starting to apply them to our physical space and our governments and the way that we relate to each other in the city. So, oh man, that was way too long. That's my bit. Questions? Comments? Do I get a PhD for that? No? Okay. Okay, so, yes.
I have one question I have is the big slide with the no way, one way sign,
Yeah.
the social media activity that purportedly led to the 700 people showing up.
Yes.
How does one observe the gap or close the gap between the social media activity and people in the room? How does those really get connected, and how does that become a forceful enterprise?
You mean how do we know that the social media drew the people to the room?
No, well, that the result, that we can feel confident that the work we do in social media will result in people on the ground in the room.
I think this is a huge question. So the really short answer is you have a sign-up sheet when you do a big event like that, and you collect email addresses. Period. Like, don't even bother collecting mailing addresses. I mean, do that if you can, but if you can collect only one piece of information, you get everybody's email address. And if you don't do that, I almost want to scold you. Like, it's just the most important thing, because if you're an advocate, if you have email addresses, you have power. We founded an organization called Park Slope Neighbors it's essentially just an email list. And it was actually, many of the email addresses, the first addresses were collected at that one-way, no-way thing. So that's really the short answer. Get email. I'll leave it with the short answer. That's critical. Well,
What was the next part? I mean, I guess the social media has to be compelling enough that when people get the email notice, kind of need to go.
or the issue set. So, it's like
The target group.
a group down in the Boston Cyclists Union invited me down to Jamaica Plain to talk about the Casey overpass issue. 100 people showed up in this little teeny library in Jamaica Plain. I mean, that issue is hot enough that you don't have to be like a great writer or a great blogger. You can just throw something up online, and every blog page is in itself a latent online community. It's a place where a discussion can start to take place. So if you wanted to jump into the Casey overpass debate right now, you could literally just throw up like a blog on Tumblr and do 2 blog posts. I mean, it's not like a newspaper. It's not like you have to have a 20-year run to make your publication. A blog could be 2 blog posts and then go away. So, yeah, the issue, it can just be the issue is compelling enough, and knowing that the community is interested.
Okay, Karen, if you're taping this and you wanted these answers to be on the tape, you should.
Sorry,
The microphone.
way over. Okay, yeah, I know. Okay, Clarence just noted we're sort of way over. We should let Ben go. Ben wants more comments and questions and is going to touch on the same stuff. I'm sorry, guys. I've been at Harvard too long. This is what all the professors here do. They'll just talk and talk and talk. Okay. Does people need a stretch or anything? No? All right.
Oh, here we go. We got a stretcher.
There's a stretcher.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Freed. I'm the editor-in-chief of Streets Blog. Let me get into the right view here. Aaron hired me in 2008. We were in the middle of the congestion pricing story, which was a huge multi-year saga, and I came in as a reporter towards the end of that. Covering, it was basically a state legislative issue at that point. That was what got me involved in Streets Blog in the first place. This notion that we could, in sort of one master stroke, do so much to curb traffic and to fund our transit system and to make space for safer biking and walking. And I took over the blog in 2010. And so what I'm going to do is really just do some nuts and bolts about like how you conceive of a beat, what goes into different sorts of posts and how you can make them as effective as possible, how you can reach the people that you want to reach. So I think people tend to forget that as late as the 5th year of Michael Bloomberg's term in office, the line was still that traffic is a good thing. This was not seen as a problem at the highest levels of city government. The message from City Hall was still, nothing has to change. This is fine. This is Broadway below Canal Street. And, what this is causing is, the buses are backed up, people can't move, but the message from the mayor was still, we like traffic, it means more people are coming here. And we operate in a media environment that is it just feeds off conflict. For a lot of TV stations and radio networks and the print publications in New York, the target audience is really car commuting suburbanites, and they can't survive without ad revenue from the auto industry. So this was a multi-part series that ran on our local CBS affiliate in 2010, and it was just attacking cyclists for 3 or 4 days on the 11 o'clock news. This is how one of our contributors to Streets Blog characterized the mentality that goes into that kind of coverage and the attitude that underlies it. He said, "It represents a traffic safety ideology that blames victims instead of perpetrators, fetishes silver bullets like seatbelts and bike helmets at the expense of promoting a genuine safety culture, and misdirects enforcement towards trivia and away from the actual sources of danger." So at the same time, and Aaron touched on this, we've really had a sea change at the top of our Department of Transportation. And we are, since 2007, our Transportation Commissioner, Jeanette Sada-Khan, has really made a quantum leap and started to take space and allocate it towards the most efficient modes. So we do have, dedicated bus lanes on East Side avenues. We have these wonderful pedestrian plazas that used to be a sea of traffic in some of the most crowded parts of Midtown. And we have these next generation bike lanes that are making cycling safe and accessible to all ages. So how do you get from where we were in 2006 to where we are now? I think there are at least 4 prerequisites that you need. You need the political will. You need the person at the top, the mayor, to understand what the problem is and to want to attack it. And the mayor, I would say Michael Bloomberg is not as vociferous about this as Rahm Emanuel, but who's really doing some things in Chicago and talking about these issues in a way that we haven't seen any other American mayor. But he has he's shown faith in Jeanette Sada-Khan to really take these issues on, and without the willingness to let this change happen, we wouldn't see this at all. Second, you need that bureaucratic vision. You need someone who has a concept of how city streets can work in a more efficient and sustainable way, and who knows how to execute it. You need the traditional advocates like Transportation Alternatives to be putting boots on the ground and getting people to meetings, framing the issues, sending out press releases, getting that print coverage. And then you need Streets Blog and street films. You need this kind of new media advocacy and communications toolkit. And what it does, it amplifies and extends the traditional advocacy model. It frames the concepts that the change agents inside government have to enact. You need to do a lot of counterintuitive things to change the way our transportation systems work. It doesn't really compute that by taking away space for cars, you can actually make traffic flow better. So you need someone who's like out there and framing the issues in a way that normal people who aren't versed in the concepts can understand. So to pull this off, there are really three audiences that you want to reach. You want your big shots, your transportation secretaries, your governors, your mayors, the people who head up your city agencies, your police commissioners, your planning commissioners, your transit agency chiefs, all these guys and girls. You want to reach as big an audience as you can. This was one of our most feel-good moments from 2010. This was a huge rally for the Prospect Park West bike lane at Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. And this photo is really only showing you about a quarter of the crowd at this thing. There's somewhere between 300 and 400 people there that day to show that they support this project. And we operate in a very dense media environment, and one of the ways we're able to sort of achieve an outsized impact is by getting our ideas to filter up to these places. And if you can get your stuff read by the people who write and report for these organizations, that's a big deal. You're going to have a much broader impact than just the audience who's reading your site. So how do you reach them? So that's what most of this presentation is going to be about, is how do you get to these different audiences? What are the strategies you use to do it? So the first thing is think of your beat as sort of like a food pyramid, a balanced diet. And at the bottom of our food pyramid for Streetsblog is bread and butter. It's not an Atkins-friendly diet at all. What is your core strength? What's the stuff that the issue set, as Aaron said, that gets people to feel invested and come back again and again? And really, for us, it's physical change to the way streets are laid out that just gets people amped. Thinking of how their street can change that's our bread and butter. So I think, when you're at the early stage, what you can do is just show how streets can be different. And that was a huge part of what we were doing in 2006 and 2007, was kind of showing these neighborhood-based ideas that were bubbling up for how they wanted their streets to change. And then we were fortunate to have a city agency come in and put out their own visions. So showing these concepts of how major arterial streets can be totally different, this just excites people. So once something actually happens, you need to go out there and show it. This was the opening day of a new public plaza in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, and it was like they were pumping Stevie Wonder, and it was just a great time. And there was a camera there, and we just got out and showed people what was going on. And then really shine a spotlight on who's working to make change happen at the neighborhood level. Make the people on the ground who are trying to change their neighborhood, make them sort of like local celebrities, shine a spotlight on them, give them all the attention they deserve. And then these are our 3 all-star NIMBYs from the last 2 years. That's our borough president, Marty Markowitz, on the left, our former transportation commissioner, Iris Weinschall, in the center, and our United States Senator, our senior senator, Chuck Schumer, who is married to our former transportation commissioner. Bad guys work. You need to you need to tell a story, and in this case, it was no oversimplification. We had good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. These were the villains. Speaking of villains, okay, next part of the diet, red meat. If someone says something outrageous, it is really to your advantage to just like toss that out there and see how people react. That will get people to your site. It can be this kind of galvanizing moment. People can comment on your blog and basically react to this silliness. This was someone from the far reaches of car-dependent New York City who thought it would be a good idea to require bike registration for everyone who's over the age of 16 or 18. And the idea got shot down pretty quickly. Your green vegetables. Transportation policy is extremely wonky. And one of the challenges is to turn stuff like transit budgets and parking policy into stuff that people can digest. And so, once you have your bread and butter and your red meat, you're in a very good position to sort of mix in this really healthy stuff. People will read it, they'll get it. This was a story, a very important story that we broke in 2010 about how the state government was rating the MTA, our transit agency. And, before the story came out, the way the papers were writing about it was, okay, the state just cut the MTA budget, tough nuggies, everyone's feeling the pain. But what was really going on was the state was raiding the dedicated transit funds and using them for general purposes. So this story played like a huge role in getting the media to start writing about this in a more accurate way that showed what was really going on. And then the last part of your diet is just eye candy. Writing about these issues, one of the things that really works to your advantage is that it's so visual. There are so many things that make for arresting images, and this is a rendering of what they could do on the Seine if they took away cars. Second strategy, really pay close attention to your headlines. Like you will spend 95% of your time writing the bulk of the post and 5% of your time writing the headline, but the headline counts for like 95% of the value and impact of that post. They grab people's attention. They're like the one thing that will stick in their heads afterward. They frame the issue like right away. And they also count for a lot in search algorithms. Google Spider, those first few words really count for a lot. And also, I think in the blogging platform that we use, your headline is what goes into the URL of the post. And the URL is also like a huge factor in search algorithms. Okay, so a few do's and don'ts. These are bad headlines from a rival transportation news site that will go unnamed. Does anyone want to take a stab at what the top headline was about? What that story was about? It's baffling, I know, okay. They're trying to work in this Knight Rider reference and, what the hell is subway sleep? Anyway, this story is about people who are upset with the fact that the MTA is going to shut down subway service overnight on some weeknights. But you have no idea that that's what the story is about. Bikes used to sell everything. Do you remember when bikes were selling everything? That's what they used to do, right? No, okay. The story was really about bikes as a marketing tool in like shop windows in the city, but you have no idea based on the verb that they used that's what they were trying to get across. And then this Mitt Romney headline, what is the big bird thing at the end? I have no idea. It's really about how he wants to put ads on public television. It has nothing to do with Amtrak. So, stay focused, stick to one concept. Here's a few examples of, go back. Is this the right one? So these are just like solid headlines. The top one, I think it gets across pretty clearly. We had a funding crisis with our transit system, sort of ongoing, but it really came to a head in 2009, and the state senate was a real roadblock. And their alternatives to putting a price on our free bridges in New York City just weren't getting the job done. The second one, often what we want to do with the blog is call attention to public figures who are behaving badly. And if you have someone who you want to focus attention on, you must put their name in the headline. One of the ways that's really effective is if you submit your site to Google News. This person who you're writing about is going to read this story in their inbox the next day. Guarantee it. Anyone who's a public figure has their Google News alert for their name. So even if if you just have an audience of one, if that's like the one person whose behavior you want to change, you've done your job. You do want to mix it up and have like some fun headlines, some intriguing headlines. I think this story at the bottom was about our since disgraced Congressperson Anthony Weiner, who was always coming up with these deranged ideas for how to fund the transit system, and basically there was no there. So how do we? It kind of helps to if you have your basic concept, this guy has nothing to say about transit, you kind of let that stew in your head for a little bit, and well, how can I say that in an interesting way, and maybe hold off on, give yourself a solid 15, 20 minutes to stew on that and see if you can come up with a good way to say it. Okay, know when to deploy humor. This was a notorious nadir of the media backlash, 2011. We had our local CBS 2 affiliate, their political correspondent, Marsha Kramer, equate the addition of a bike lane to 2nd Avenue as something that would facilitate terrorism. And this was kind of a moment where I was they've gone too far. They've just become a self-parody. This is actually pretty great for us. And so this was the headline that came out of that. Go right ahead. Keep on saying this. You're hilarious. And that is, can be a very effective way to deflate someone when the time is right. I mean, sometimes you have to be actually outraged and serious, but that
really went viral too. You helped frame that whole thing there.
An awesome headline and a funny post will just get you a lot of action. People will be tweeting it. They love to share this stuff. It definitely goes around a lot more than a real straight post would. Number 3, the graphics. You must think about the graphics for every single post that you write. There may be 1 out of 20 times when you can't come up with a graphic, but 95% of the time you need to have a visual that goes with your post. And that's really, more than anything, I think this is the key to having stuff go viral and have people send something around. They're going to send around a picture or an image. that you can't beat it. So different types of graphics, charts and graphs. This is a graph showing the safety in numbers effect in New York City, where the cycling rate is going up and the bike injury rate is holding steady or declining. And this was one of the most viewed posts of all time. It just spread like wildfire. Huge mega blogs were picking this up and embedding this graphic. What's going out there on the street? All this stuff you never really see. I don't know. I guess you do kind of see like these images of traffic carnage on the news and in the paper, but just the vantage point that you can get from a street photo, this stuff will also just go totally viral. Yes? No. This is a user-submitted photo. That's number 5 or 6. You need to get people to help you out. Again, like fantastically visual issue set, just showing people, what the plan is for some sort of street redesign. This is one of, this was like a huge traffic vortex right next to the most central public space in Brooklyn, and just showing what the city has on the drawing board. Headshots. This is okay. If you want to get a decision maker's attention, put their name in the headline and put their headshot in the post. It's pretty simple. It's not, it's not a stunning or interesting image, but it will get their attention and make them sit up or take notice. This is our governor on the right and our state Senate majority leader on the left, just applauding the fact that they cut $300 million from our transit budget. So here's a little case study. This is not our graphic. This was our governor Andrew Cuomo has acquired the reputation as someone who just like gets things done and imposes his will. And this was an image that got it went viral with the political blogs after I think GQ photoshopped him his head onto Arnold's body. And okay, so we sort of flipped that on its head, and it was like, this guy, Andrew Cuomo, he's kind of incompetent at running our transit system. He's a short-sighted, he can't see what he's doing. He's like the Mr. Magoo of transit policy. And, this also, this got picked up by the political blogs. They loved it. This is the New York Daily News political blog. It's a total amateur Photoshop job that I did in my living room in 20 minutes. We have an office, but this was the week in between Christmas and New Year's, so I was working at home. Number 4, keep people plugged in to what's going on. I know that it's sort of a basic concept, but there are a few like very specific ways to do this well. One of them is to have a daily headline wrap up, go up in the morning every day. This is just like crack to people who care about your issues. They like have to read it. It will just generate an audience in and of itself. Like people will, you're basically doing like a huge service and saving people time by aggregating the news that's related to the subject matter. We have an events calendar. Even if you don't have I'm pretty sure you can get some sort of module to do an events calendar pretty easily. Yes?
Could you just go back to the last photo? So you're not supplying links there. You're just saying.
These are links. Sorry. Yeah, what this is, these are, so one of our people will be up at 7:30, combing through the major dailies, their websites, TV news stations, other transportation blogs. We have, readers will send us headlines. The staff will send around stuff that they notice throughout the day. So these are links on the right side of each headline. You will see links to the actual content somewhere else. Yeah, it's you can do this in about I'd say it takes me about an hour once you get into the hang of it. And the other service this performs is it gives you a chance to sort of weigh in and frame the issues and all at once at the beginning of the day. Okay, so an events calendar, just like telling people where they want to be that week. A lot of the local political action for livable street stuff in New York happens in these venues called community boards. And a project can live or die based on how a community board votes. So a lot of the stuff we put in our calendar is like, okay, Community Board 6 in Brooklyn is going to be talking about this bike lane project on Wednesday evening. If you support it, you got to be there. This is just a huge service to people to let them know how they can make an impact. And here's, you might even want to pull out a specific event into its own post if it's really important. And here's what comes out of that. Like Aaron was showing with the one way, no way event. This was I think this was really the the biggest public hearing on the Prospect Park West bike lane in 2011. We packed this room with 300 people, and this was a great photo op when someone at the microphone asked the audience who supports the redesign. And so, yeah, Streets Blog played a big role in driving people out to this meeting. Okay, getting readers invested. You really want to have a two-way street with your blog. It can't just be you pontificating and telling people stuff. It works much better when people feel like they have a stake in your blog. So there's a couple ways to do that. You can ask them to frame issues for you. And this was a critical moment in 2009 when this block of 4 state senators obstructed a brilliant plan to fund the transit system, and we had to come up with a name for these guys because they were calling themselves the Four Amigos, but we didn't think that was really the right name for them. And a reader came up with the idea of calling them the Fair Hike Four. Blame the next fair hike and these guys, like associate it with them, and that, it stuck with our readers. We could refer to these 4 guys as the Fair Hike Four, in perpetuity. Dozens of subsequent posts use this reader's idea. And user submitted content like photos. There's only 2 full-time staff on New York City Streets Blog, so we're really counting on our readers to go out there, show us what's going on. Here's a reader sent in a picture of a recent plaza implementation near Union Square. And don't be afraid to pluck stuff right out of your inbox and turn that into blog content. Here was a situation where a reader just emailed us and was like, I ran into some hairy situations while I was riding my bike. How do you handle a situation when you're biking and you pass someone who's going the wrong way? What's the socially acceptable way of telling that person not to do that? And this is just great conversation fodder. It's a way to build community. The trick is to just separate the wheat from the chaff, because you will have a lot of stuff in your inbox that you don't want to turn into blog content. So the skill is really determining what merits mention on the blog. Always add value. So what do I mean by this? Well, a lot of blogs are kind of criticized for just kind of rehashing or reblogging and not contributing anything to the conversation or to the knowledge base. So you just have to always, every single post, you have to think what's the thing that I'm adding by writing this? And so, it's easy when you're breaking news that no one else has reported. Well, right away you're adding something that no one else has done. So I'm gonna use as examples 3 examples of a totally new genre of story, which was the bike lane opinion poll. We started seeing these pop up all over the place last year. So this was something that like no one else was talking about. This city council member out in far reaches of car-dependent Eastern Queens, New York, commissioned a poll, and he found that like 61% of his constituents support bike lanes, which is just very surprising. Yes.
So how does a small group, that can't go off and hire a big poll, how do you do that? You just have your local ad?
Right. So you don't always have to, you can add value without breaking news. So the next couple examples will be, if someone else is reporting on something, you can take that and, add your spin, add your slant, add your insight. And that's, I think, what you really want to be thinking of when you're taking someone else's content and turning it into your own is, what am I adding that hasn't been said before? So this was a bike lane poll that got picked up everywhere. This was the first one. It was done by Quinnipiac. And, all the papers were reporting, oh, look, actually bike lanes are pretty popular, 54%. So the kind of slant that we added, if you can't read that lead sentence, we wrote, after several months of almost uniformly bad press from New York City's major media outlets, the expansion of the city's bike network still enjoys sizable majority support. So it's really just like that one sentence where you're reminding people that, like, hey, we just went through this crazy period where bike lanes couldn't catch a break anywhere. The traditional media is not going to frame this piece of news that way because they're sort of complicit in the tarnishing of bike lanes in the public mind. So just like it can be just like something that small, but it's actually like, that's what adds your voice to the piece. And you can also, just draw on your existing knowledge or like stuff that you have come across elsewhere. After we'd had a few of these bike lane polls come out. It wasn't really news anymore, but you could, add this piece of context. So like, this other poll showed that, God only had 52% approval, so bike lanes are more popular than God. This is the kind of thing that actually, this is what will get bigger media to start following you, is like developing your own kind of voice. And it can be kind of daunting. Like, how do you have your own voice? Like, what is my voice? But I don't think that's the way you should think about it. The thing is, like, how do you add value to this stuff, to this information that's out there? And, in the process of thinking, what's the value that I'm going to add, your voice will come out. And so, having that, this is what will, build up your Twitter following. This is what will get bigger media outlets to start paying attention to you. If you're like making cogent points and adding value, that's really going to be big in the long run. Rapid response. This is like, I wore myself down in the last year trying to do rapid response to this stuff. It was just one headline after the other every single day for months on end, tearing into the bike projects, the bus projects, the transportation commissioner. It just would not cease. And Streetsblog really played an important role battling this and containing this, and eventually it sort of ran its course, and it did not inflict political damage. We were kind of like a shield that kept this stuff from sapping the will of the government to keep on doing all the good stuff that we want them to do. So it's pretty basic. This stuff is just garbage. There's no real underlying fact beneath it. And if you have been paying attention and the actual history of these policies and the process that led to them, you will be in an excellent position to rebut the bad headlines. So like the predominant narrative during the New York City bikelash of 2011 was that, we'll go back here a little bit, the transportation commissioner is imposing her personal will on the communities of New York City. They don't want this. She's a psycho bike lady. And, we're every day out there saying, you know what, this is just wrong. All these projects went through the community board process. They got majority votes. People have been asking for this stuff for years. It's not like we have 100% consensus, but like there are many, many New Yorkers, most New Yorkers, who want this to happen. So even, the paragon of objective journalism, the New York Times, puts its slant on bike policy. This was a story that came out in September last year, where these 200 college professors, they kind of followed up their own study on how many bicycles injure pedestrians with their own new study of how many bicycles injure pedestrians, and their new study found that this was happening more frequently than their old study. But the headline that the New York Times ran kind of gives you the impression that like this is on the rise, that all these bike lanes you're building are endangering pedestrians. The New York Times, this was like infuriating to me to see this headline. And this is what was really going on, was that more people are riding bikes, and the number of pedestrians who are getting hurt by bikes is going down. Because who can say why? Maybe we're just getting accustomed to having more bikes on the street. But all we had to do was go back to these professors and say, can you show us the year-over-year data that's just from New York City? And eventually, unfortunately, after the whole 72-hour news cycle had run its course, they got it to us, and we were able to get the truth out. You want to tell your stories in a way where you can have like a continuing arc. Like these big transportation policy stories, they play out over the span of a really long time. So you want to start off by really defining the problem well, laying out the cause and effect. One of the wonkier battles we're fighting in New York is to eliminate off-street parking minimums, which are in effect everywhere outside of Manhattan, north of 96th Street or 110th Street. And so we're lucky to have this great report that Transportation Alternatives put out that kind of quantified the effect of these parking minimums. And the takeaway is that if we don't do anything about this, we're going to have 1 billion more miles of traffic per year by 2030. So it's sort of like offsetting everything that's good in the mayor's sustainability plan regarding transportation. So this is one of those posts that's sort of like laying out the issue for people, defining the issue. So once you've done that, you want to make sure that you assign responsibility for the problem. Like whose fault is this and who can fix it? So in New York, it's really the planning department that has the power, and also the city council. But the planning department has to initiate any reform to off-street parking policy. And then you also want to define what the solution is, and hang it on the person who can enact that solution. So it's really up to our illustrious planning commissioner, Amanda Burden, to get the ball rolling on off-street parking reform. Strategy number 9, this is this is like high impact stuff. This is like people hate to be told that they are falling behind other places. They're falling behind their peers. So comparing the people in charge in your city to the people in charge in other cities and how they're just getting blown out of the water is just an excellent advocacy journalism strategy. Here we have our police commissioner who, this is just totally embarrassing for him. The Los Angeles police chief takes street safety much more seriously than our police chief. So you have a couple different elements here. I mean, you have the name in the headline, the headshot, and just comparing him to his counterpart in Los Angeles. He's not getting the job done. You can compare specific policies. Here we can show that like Philly, DC, and I think even Boston are like doing stuff to reform their parking minimums, and we're just letting them stagnate in New York. Compare street designs. This was like before we had the big revolution at DOT. This is back in 2006. Aaron took this shot of protected bike lane in Montreal, and at the time we had nothing like this in New York. This was like, I guess it literally was like a different country. And compare results. If you can show data, hard data, showing that your city does not measure up to another city, especially at something as important as pedestrian safety, that's quite damning to the people in charge of pedestrian safety in your city. Strategy number 10, that's our final strategy. Hold the big shots accountable. This, again, name in the headline, headshot. This is our transportation committee chair in the city council who's really shown himself to be a real troglodyte when it comes to bike and pedestrian issues. We were kind of holding out hope for him in the beginning. He's from a kind of suburban district in the city, and we thought, okay, well, he won't be in favor of like performance parking and stuff like that, but at least we can get him to support bike lanes and safer streets like that. He seems reachable, but it turns out that no, this guy is like not. He's not open to those ideas. So just like calling out the hypocrisy, like he held a hearing on public plazas. A lot of business leaders and people came to testify saying, we love this stuff, like we want more. This is great. And then he goes around and says that they're hurting business. So just like having a long memory, having a good memory of like what's come before, and then holding people accountable for their actions when they are willfully ignorant of that history. Remind people of their promises. When Iris Weinshaw, the previous DOT commissioner, was in charge, Aaron did really great work just reminding people of the promises she'd made in the past to fix dangerous streets, and how she just wasn't meeting the targets, meeting the timelines that she'd set up for herself and her agency. So I think when you put all these together, you have to remember that you have like a narrative arc, and that you're telling people a story. And so, all of these strategies should really be in the service of like making a story that people can follow, with protagonists and antagonists. And, sometimes they'll switch. Sometimes someone will like come over from the dark side. But just like making that cohesive narrative, that's also a big part of like what gets people to come back again and again. So for a case study, I'm just going to use one long-range story that we did, and that is the first story that I covered at StreetsBlog, which is congestion pricing. So here's just like how we use these strategies to do that, to cover that story. Okay, defining the problem. It turns out that if we implemented congestion pricing, motorists would pay about $1 billion a year to enter Manhattan below 60th Street over crossings that are currently free. But it's the cost of congestion is imposing $13 billion annually in costs on the city. So this is sort of like a graphic and a post that framed the issue. I mean, it's a big, complicated issue, and here's something that breaks it down into nice little chunks. Comparing cities, we could go and say, look, London is way out ahead of us. They've done it. They're reaping the benefits. This was even before Bloomberg came out with Plan YC. Aaron was, showing what was going on in London and urging New York to do the same. Truth Squad, the big lie that the opponents of congestion pricing would fall back on is that it's this regressive tax that's like imposing costs on low-income New Yorkers. And the reason that's a lie is if we had enacted it, it would have funneled so much money to the transit system, which is what low-income New Yorkers count on to get around. And we were lucky we had some great research done by a local advocacy group that just showed, it's the well-off people who are driving into Manhattan, and it's not this regressive policy that people are making it out to be. Keep people in the loop. We had a bunch of public hearings on congestion pricing, just telling people when they could show up and make their voice heard. And holding big shots accountable. I really like this story. It was a representative in the state legislature who represented an inner Brooklyn district was aligning himself with these suburban opponents of congestion pricing, and this story just kind of called him out for betraying the people he's supposed to represent. Wait a second, the thing about congestion pricing is it failed. We did not win that fight. So I guess I just want to wrap up on the note that just because the outcome wasn't what you wanted, it doesn't mean you didn't have an impact. You're not going to win 100%. You're not going to bat 1,000. But we still, elevated the discourse, and we also sort of raised expectations so that, the narrative now is we didn't, the state legislature did not finish the job. There's this they have to address this at some point. It might not be for a few years, but they will get to it, and we'll be around when they do. And that wraps it up for me.
Questions for Ben?
Are your numbers certified, and then do you give them to the DOT? Do they take your numbers, or are these just for the general public to kind of gravel around?
What numbers?
94% aren't effective, things like that. You say you get these numbers from volunteers or from other advocacy groups.
No, we're very careful with the data that we cite. So, the statistics on household income and who drives into New York, those are all from the census. Those all came from the U.S. Census, and another advocacy group compiled that. So, I mean, it is asking a lot for your reporter or your volunteer blogger to crunch those numbers, but your blogger, is the person who can get those numbers and broadcast them and distribute them.
And the flip side of that, do you then present them to the officials who are trying to sway?
I mean, the blog is the method of distribution, and I think congestion pricing actually was happening before we had Twitter. And one of the things that's great about Twitter is that you can just tweet right at somebody, and even if they have, even if it's not the actual legislator who's running that Twitter feed, their staff is doing it, and they'll notice. You put something out that is. You tweet some accountability post you wrote, other people retweet that, the legislature's going to notice. Yes? I think we can do that.
Yeah. we can do
They're
that.
also taping.
Oh, and there is videotape. The GSD is putting up videotape.
I'd be happy to make this available. Yes?
Have you ever had any situations where you're posting about like a gateway or something and have like negative things come back from that person?
Oh yeah, that's how you know you're being effective. They, especially Cuomo's people. One of the big stories right now is actually this was about the transit funding reduction. So he cut $300 million in dedicated transit taxes very recently, and his line is, "Well, we're going to make up the difference. Just trust me." Um, and uh, and so we wrote a post that was like, well, if they don't come through with it, the effect is going to be this. It's going to be bad. And then his people called us up and yelled at us for 15 minutes. And that's basically, that's just proof that you're reaching the right people and that they care about what you're writing. And if you wrote something that's like factually inaccurate, then you want to fix that, and that's not good. But in this case, it was just someone complaining about the fact that they're getting bad press. They had nothing to correct in the end. Yes.
You work with volunteer bloggers. Could you talk a little bit about what the mentoring process is for trying to get their stories to be really great and solid and on from the staff's point of view?
So what we do is use content that other people submit to us. So we're not so much mentoring people, but we are like refining the raw material that comes into us and turning that into blog worthy content. But it is interesting about other volunteer bloggers. I think one of the side effects of having Streets Blog has been a lot of readers have gone on to start writing their own blogs. So there's a blog called Cap in Transit. He's like a big name in transit policy blogging now. He was a Streets Blog reader. There's another blog, Brooklyn Spoke, that's just got started in the last couple of years, who writes about bike policy in Brooklyn and bike culture in Brooklyn, and he's also a Streets Blog reader. So, once you get to a certain size, you will start seeding these other smaller blogs, and they'll just take cues from you because they've been your followers. One more.
I want to show my ignorance. It seems to me that what you're calling a blog is like a news report,
Yeah.
and I thought a blog was a conversation. So, we're all worried about having to control what people are saying to us. But in fact, what you're saying is that, looking at updates really could be like a news page.
When you say you're worried about people about controlling what people will say.
I thought a blog was a conversation. Anybody could write it, sort of like Facebook, except located where your web page is or whatever. And that you might need somebody to make sure that there isn't bad stuff going on. Not a good conversation. We want that. In other words, for us, this is the Sustainable Watertown. We want to create a vision for what, instead of a Walmart, we could have.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you do something like that? How do you, it's not obviously your kind of blog. Do I need a different name for what I want to think?
No, I think you could definitely do.
Master to make sure that
Yeah.
using
So Streets Blog is like high end blogging. Like it has paid staff. It's not something you can do on a shoestring. But blogging, covers a whole range of content production. And I think what you're talking about is definitely bloggable. You could be sharing success stories of like other towns that have fought Walmarts. There's a lot of it gets back to the value add point. Like, you don't have to be generating original news and reporting. Although I'm guessing there are probably like meetings you would want to cover, or factoids. Yeah. So, but as long as you have, if there are points that you want to make, that you want to get out there, that you want to communicate, that's all you need to have a blog, I would say. We should really get started with Clarence.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have plenty of time.
Yeah,
We'll have time
So
afterward
we have
for-
this
for
lunch.
questions.
We have this lunch coming up, and we can take more time in the other room there. Likewise, if anyone's starving, we're running a little late, you can also run in and grab a sandwich and come back. So let's move on to Street Films University.
Well, I kind of benefit from going last because I don't have to cover, since some people here have been, thanks to Aaron and some of what Ben said, you kind of already know a little bit of what Street Films is. But I'm Clarence Eckerson. I'm the director of Street Films. And this is kind of a new product we have that we've been kind of pushing of late, is that, we've always wanted people, and we've always been very good on the site and people emailing in or sending us their clips of giving them advice on how to make films and learn from our mistakes. So one thing last year we decided to do was just kind of put together a PowerPoint and start testing it out and see, what the reception is like. And we've given it twice now. It's the third time, and it's still a work in progress, but we have about 2 hours of a Street Films University kind of thing. I've eliminated a lot and kind of condensed it down to about a half an hour, so we won't cover everything, but I think that whether or not you want to make films or want to even be involved in documenting things, this will be very interesting to see kind of almost behind the scenes what we do. And it applies whether you, most of the stuff would apply whether you're involved in transportation or not. If it's like, again, if it's something to do with schools, or Aaron said garbage, or if you have a different green movement, or, whatever your topic might be. So I'm just going to quickly just spend a minute or two just saying these are just some of the films we've made, screenshots from some of the films. Sometimes we're in other countries, and sometimes we're in New York, and that's because we kind of grew over the years to wanting to show best practices in other places. So, these are just a few examples of some of the films we have up on the site. We have over 425 that we've made in roughly 5 years. And this is it. This is the crew. We've always had 3-person crew. It was me for a while for the first few years. And we've got Elizabeth and I are both full-time filmmakers, and Elizabeth and Robin is our aptly with the middle name Urban. That didn't affect us when we hired her, but it was kind of cute. But she's our office person, but she also is being groomed into a very fine filmmaker herself. But so we're essentially a 2.5-person filmmaking staff, you could say. And this is the site, which Aaron showed you before. This is current. We have a great film up there from Guadalajara, one of their Ciclavia, which is great. But this is what it looks like. And our objective essentially is to make films that get people excited, to really take these topics and these concepts and make them, more available to the general public. So, we're trying to make films that a transportation planner or somebody who's really heavily involved with transportation likes, but also a fireman or a homemaker or a teenager or somebody can also understand. So that's really like the goal that we always have had with these films. We want to make them very accessible. Want to mostly stay positive, although I'll say their first few years were spent mostly showing a lot of negative stuff in New York City. Now we're kind of beyond that. There's every once in a while we'll have a film that will show some of the negative things going on, or hey, we need to fix this intersection. But since we've had a great transportation commissioner, mostly it's showing some of the great stuff she's doing. And another thing I always like to point out is that 99% of the time we are not using cars. I don't even personally have a driver's license, never have, which, lugging around equipment sometimes gets fun. So we're a unique synergy of like journalism, advocacy, and filmmaking. We're 1/3 of pretty much each of those. And we do a lot of little documentaries. We sometimes go into animation, and but most of the stuff is we're showing best practices all around the country and New York City. Aaron mentioned this. Our Ciclavia film was extremely popular. This is probably our breakout film. It's been watched over 185,000 times. Actually, I got to update that. It's over 200,000 now. But we went down to Bogota to show what this great Ciclavia was like, which is on Sunday. Every Sunday they shut miles and miles of roads and open them up to people. And you could see we published this film in December 2007. And I'm not saying that we're wholly responsible for making this happen, but none of these cities in the U.S. had any kind of road closure like this until we published our film. There were a lot of movements going on in a lot of cities to do this, but they lacked convincer, the tools to show the people that make the decisions that are working on it. And when we made our film, it really just kind of started a cascade of people in cities doing what they want to do. And here's somebody very important in the transportation world, Mia Burke, and we always love this quote. She says, "If you only have 15 minutes with an elected official, take 10 minutes and show them some street films." And that's exactly what we're. So, Street Films University, here we are. I'm just going to go through some of, and a lot of this is very fun. I'm going to show some film clips. Essentially, what we're doing, and it's funny because what we're doing is very complicated, and at the same time, it's extremely easy. And it's only if you follow certain rules and you know what you're doing, you're going to come out with a pretty good product. So if you're out there making your own films, I say you can make films that are probably 80% as good as ours if you just kind of, take your time, follow some of the tips we're going to show you here. First of all, as I said before, we tried to at least hit one of these in every of our films, but many of them we hit all 4 of them. You always are going to need an idea, and there's so many ideas out there, but there's so many bad ones too. So it's like, what do you select? I have just a few ideas up here that are kind of generally safe places. Always profiling somebody in the transportation world, like whether it be a cyclist or a mayor who rides his bike, or a mechanic at the local bike shop, or somebody who rides a bus with their family. I mean, there's always unique stories out there. There's probably 20 or 30 unique stories in here that, we could follow somebody around with a camera, you could tell us. But, there's other things you could do. A presser, you can generate a presser into a film. You can do films that counter myths that are out there in the press. You can demonstrate a certain topic or transportation concept. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you 4 very brief 35-second clips back to back of just what some of these ideas kind of can become. Let's see. I think we need audio. Hold on. I'll wait. I think we need audio. Here we go. See if it comes up this time. Yeah, I think we're going to get audio this time. And this is just something so simple. We profiled a whole bunch of New York City bike riders.
About a year and a half ago, my doctor said I was not only fat, I was obese. And that was sort of a wake-up call. I was trying to figure out what could I do to make it so that I could get some exercise into my daily life. I borrowed a bike from a friend one day, and it seemed pretty good here in Queens. So a few days later, I went into the city and I bought a bike, rode it home, and I've been riding back and forth to work ever since. The ride takes me about 40 minutes. My subway commute was also about 40 minutes.
A road diet is any time we take any lane out of a road. If you have, say, 4 lanes and you knock it down to just 2 lanes, you've put the road on a diet. I first coined the phrase and used it in 1996 in an article that Peter Lagerwey and I wrote together. It had sticking power. People liked the term. They could understand what it meant. The most common road diet is converting 4 lanes to 2 and then putting in the 3rd lane for turning.
Makes a special appearance very quick, shortly. But this is Transportation Alternatives has many bike rides in the city, and every once in a while we'll go out and just cover one. It's just a montage. We usually shoot it one day and put it up the next day. Stay up all night just putting together something fun. And this is just always fun to do here.
Get in. This is my nav, my Lincoln Navigator. So I go down to Washington and I just am there saying, hold up, what about cars? What about the cars? There are not enough roads for cars. People need to be able to drive their cars. That's an American right. This is a city for people who have to get things done, and they need cars to get things done. You're gonna get me where I need to go, aren't you? And you're gonna do it perfectly. Because you were made with precision and with love. Bikers are a pimple on the butt of any city.
So all those films are longer than what we just saw, but and I got to tell you that whole thing just was all improv by that woman. We just had an idea that we wanted to just make, the day in the life of a SUV auto lobbyist, and she kind of took it from there. It's kind of cool with just a little bit of prodding. So when you make a film, you got to kind of think about what your target audience is, and it can be everybody, or it can be any one of these people or groups, and that's kind of important because it'll kind of guide which way your film will go. If as Ben has said, sometimes if you write an article on Streets Blog and it just gets to that one decision maker, if nobody else read it, that's an effective article. And so we've done films that have targeted some of these people. A funder. One sometimes what you could do is we were interested in a certain group, getting some support from them and some funding, and made sure to interview him and put him in the video I was doing because he was at an event and he loved it. So there's lots of different things you can do here. And then who do you want in your film is also important, and all of these things based upon certain what the topic is, or what the mood of the city or a community or event you're doing are all possible. And then also you could, just like I did, just the footage and the B-roll of the bike ride. I mean, you don't even have to do anything that complicated. And this is just a general tip on interviewing before we go to the next topic. If you are talking to people and you have important people that are going to be in your film, you should always be ready. If you're completely incompetent shooting the person, they'll never know that. But if you show up late, if you don't have questions to ask, if you don't, set up reasonable time and place and what you're going to say, that's all very important to exuding some kind of professionality. And when you interview them, this is always good because you can always get a sound check at the beginning. Always ask them to say their name, their job title, and spell it, because who knows? You may, like with us, if I shoot something, it might be used by one of my colleagues. They may not know who the person's name was, how to spell it, who they are. So that's always important to have on tape. So now we're moving into production. And, these days, everybody has some kind of device that records video. The iPhone most of the new generations all have to record video, and they record somewhat decent video. You may also have one of these things, the flip camera, which is now, I understand, now out of business or going out of business. But I just recently shot something with an iPad, which came out incredibly well. A lot of people have iPads, and not many people are using them to shoot video, which is amazing, because the iPad actually shoots a pretty good image, especially if you're outside, and especially if you hold both ends of it. It gives you a real steady shot versus like a phone or like a small camera where your arm is kind of like moving around. You never know. The iPad's been really cool. And preparation is key. You always got to have charged batteries. All these kind of things are important that you see up here right now. But the one thing I'll say at the bottom is make sure you hydrate and wear sunscreen and comfortable clothes. I'm become famous for like almost destroying myself on a shoot. And one day, like when we went to the Ciclavia video, I mean, we were out there for 6 or 8 hours straight in the sun near the equator, didn't wear any sunscreen, didn't drink enough water. So, take care of yourself. I'm getting better at it though. And then lighting tips. And I'm just going to come right back to this in a minute. While we're on the topic of shooting a steady image, there's many different ways you can shoot a steady image no matter what kind of camera you have. Obviously, using a tripod or a monopod is great, and a monopod is really great because they usually condense into something about this small, and you can just extend and put the camera on it, hold it as steady as you can. But another thing is, like, when you have your camera, just kind of jam it right into your face if it's got an eyepiece like I am in that picture there. And that will, if you keep your arms like this, that's almost like having a mini tripod. And then another thing is, you can just go lean up against a wall or something solid wherever you're shooting. So now I'm gonna come back to the lighting tips. When you are out shooting, the best scenario is always shoot on a nice, sunny, bright day. I know that's not always possible, but if you're shooting something, say here on campus, pick a couple, say we're gonna shoot this week, and if it's showing pedestrians walking through the campus or something, on Sunday night, check the weather, and if it's like, well, Monday's gonna be really gray, but Tuesday's supposed to be bright, sunny, and in the 70s, Obviously, it makes a big difference, too, in the films. People have actually said that to us. They're always like, how does most of your films, you always get such great, everything looks beautiful, blue sky? It's like, yeah, well, because when we can, we try to pick the best days, because that does help. Always try to position your subjects facing the light. Many people here probably take photographs, so they probably already know that. But if you have somebody, if you're shooting into the sun or a light, you will silhouette, and you'll see why that's bad in a minute. And then there's always things when you're shooting that can get into the frame. Your own shadow. You can get your own shadow on somebody that you're shooting an interview with somebody. There's always so many things you always got to think about. And at night, you can always kind of get a good quality image if you shoot under a street lamp or in Times Square. Times Square is amazing. Shooting footage in Times Square at night, at midnight, no problem. There's so many lights. So now I'm going to skip back ahead. And this here's a good example of our friend Aaron Napperstack in two different kinds of shoots. I won't say who shot the first one, but you could see he's out on 3rd Avenue there in Brooklyn, and he looks pretty bad. I mean, it was a pretty important video, but, he's silhouetted. The lack of light on his face makes it harder to focus. The sky is completely blown out, and then you see him on the right. He's interviewing Earl Blumenauer, where I've properly made sure the sun was behind us, put them properly facing each other. You got some nice mix of stuff in the background, and everything's in focus. One important thing when you're doing films like we're doing at Street Films, probably the most important thing is to shoot so much B-roll, and B-roll is an old term, and so I'll have to describe it. B-roll used to be when you used to have the old film strips, and you had your interview was on your A film, and then B was what footage you put in there as the person was talking about stuff. So B-roll is essentially your evidence. It's your what you're trying to convey. It's the visual of what your interview subjects are talking about. So, you could see this is all B-roll. Here I am shooting some kids painting. We did some street painting film there. But it's important to shoot. When you think you have enough, you shoot some more. And then when you think you have enough after that, shoot some more. And then go get lunch and then be like, well, maybe I should shoot some more. Because you can never have, if you need footage of a bus, you might, you might not have enough people getting on the bus. You might need a more crowded bus. If you're shooting shots of cyclists especially, one thing we try to do is, although we don't try to overly compensate, but we don't ever really like to show cyclists doing the wrong thing in New York. And if I'm out shooting a physically separated bike lane and I want to show it populated with people, I may have to wait for a while to get 3, 4, 5, 6 cyclists go by. But then some delivery guy might ride the wrong way in the middle of the shot. And it's like, well, I don't really want to use that shot. Or, there's so many different things that can happen. So just shoot lots of B-roll. And this is just some more tips that I kind of condensed from some of our other slides and videos. But along with the B-roll, the 3-second rule is something I always use is if you need some shots of some crowds walking somewhere and you're like, okay, I think I got it. Well, then don't hit stop yet on your camera. Count to yourself 3 seconds and then hit stop. because, and it's happened to me many times, it used to all the time, it's like, oh, I'm out somewhere, and in the craziness of you trying to shoot this and that and the other, you're like, oh, I got that shot. It's like you get home, you watch it, you're like, wow, I only had the camera steady and focused and not moving for 1.5 seconds. That shot is not going to help me. So if you count to 3, you at least have 3 seconds, which is usually what you need for a shot, 3-4 seconds if you're trying to show something. And again, always know when to do your research and know when's the best time to get footage. You know, for example, if you, we're probably going to do a project down in Raleigh, Durham, and they want us to do some films about people using their buses down there. And they wanted us to come down at the end of March. And I said, well, when's spring break for you guys? And they're like, oh yeah, it's the end of March. It's like, well, there's a lot more people using the buses down there when school's out, when everybody's away. So, you know, you want to try to time whatever your subject is. And getting great sound, we use complicated lavalier mics, wireless mics. Interference is always a problem these days with everybody having cell phones and other kinds of devices. But you can also get good sound by using lots of iPads and iPhones. And this is just, I'll give you a couple of things. First of all, try to get as close as you can to your subject. And I don't mean putting the camera right in their face, but if I'm going to interview Aaron and Ben, who are sitting on the front row, I'm not going to sit here and ask them questions from here. You want to get close to them. You want to get in the quietest place you can. And that can even be on a very noisy street in New York. Trying to find a place where you just doesn't seem like it's as noisy. And then another very important thing is, as a filmmaker or a person shooting the video, putting your back to the sources of the sound. So I would never take a person, and especially if I'm just shooting with my iPhone or my iPad, if the traffic's going by on the street right here, I would not position them here and then shoot them here. I would turn them around, put them in front of a building, put my back to the traffic. The sound will be much better. And then another thing that's hard to know, even when you're doing this professionally, you have headphones and everything, you never know what other kinds of music, sounds of noise or music might disrupt you. So like if somebody's jackhammering even 2 blocks away, that might come out in your audio. So it's always good to keep those things in mind. So now we get to some of the more fun stuff. So post-production. And this is just kind of things I picked up over the years. When you make films, and you're trying to show things or to show a concept, it's always best to show. It's most interesting to people to show things from perspectives they don't get, and in most cases, that's shooting either from low on the ground up, or from overhead. Like for example, right now, if most of you people are sitting down here in the lower chairs, but if you were standing up there looking down on you right now, suddenly you'd be like, wow, it looks totally different to me from up there, from where you're sitting now. So I've always tried to keep in mind how can you get some of these things, and overheads are always the best. So one thing is, there's tour bus excursions in almost every city. And I've actually taken 4 in New York City, none to actually see the sites, all to shoot video from. So I always tell people, if you're trying to show something, and I'm going to play this, but here's a tour bus. You can see I zoom in, there's actually a guy taking photos from the top here. But that would have been me with video. But you can see you get interesting vantage points of the street. Wow, it's a little blurry for some reason. But go right past the street light. You also have the comfort of that you're actually sitting in a vehicle and don't have to worry about where you're going. You get great shots of public spaces from above. And then this is one of my more interesting shots. This shot looks like it was taken, like I brought a $2,000 dolly system or something, rented for the day, and brought it to Grand Central Station, and shot this. I'm going to play this, but at the end you'll see where I shot this from. So it's a nice, it looks like a really beautiful crane shot, and actually I shot it by standing on the escalator. just coming down in, and I've used that in many places. But you just get ready, get on the escalator, make sure that again, make sure there's nobody in front of you, so they're not right in front of you, and then you just hold the camera as steady as possible, and then you just go down the escalator. And I did it, and it was amazing. I did some films in Melbourne, Australia, and they have a lot of some of their most busy places. They have open air escalators, like right to the street, outdoors. So I got amazing footage of like people are like, "How did you do that? Why, one person camera crew?" So here's another kind of example of trying to get overheads. See up there, there's a walkway. In Minneapolis, they have skyways everywhere if you haven't been there. And so you could get great shots from these skyways. You just stand up there all day and shoot beautiful footage. And another thing that's nice about it is, sometimes people might get a little nervous or notice that you're there. And when you're up in something like that, nobody says anything to you. Nobody's like, "What are you doing? Why are you shooting pictures of me and my kid?" or whatever. Or, why are you shooting this bus? Or why are you shooting people getting on the transit? It's like you're up there and you're all alone. So these are also some tips to think about while you're making a short film that's effective as advocacy tool. A lot of times you'll see people making these productions that are very long and essentially boring. And you really need to kind of compress time as much as possible. And the 3 minute goal for most of our films, I'd say most of our films are between 3 and 4 minutes. That's really where you want to aim your goal. You want to try to get your argument and your footage and what you're trying to say done in 3 or 4 minutes. And essentially, you also want to front load it. You want to get it done in the first minute or two. You want to get your most important stuff. Leave stuff that's still important, but maybe not at the top of your agenda for the end of the film. So in case people only watch it for a minute, they'll get at least the main part of your argument. Again, use that B-roll very liberally. And when people put statistics and graphics in video films, sometimes they don't leave them up long enough to read or comprehend. And what can happen is, and I've been somewhat guilty of this early on, but now I make sure to watch my films over and over and over and over. If you put a graphic up and say you're trying to fit in more shots, once you've seen a segment of film or your film like 20 or 30 times, you're just like, oh, I could steal another second. I can make that a second shorter and a second shorter, or make this short. And then soon, of course, it because you're familiar with the film. You've watched it over and over, and you're like, oh, I can do that. But in actuality, the person who's going to be seeing it for the first time doesn't have that familiarity with your film. So you gotta, every time you watch it, you gotta kind of sit back and make like it's your first time. And you gotta make sure that everything that's up there you can read. And a good way of testing that is to show it to a friend or to show it to your colleagues and say, is there anything in here that you didn't have enough time to read or comprehend, or was this graphic up for too short a time? And if you don't shoot enough B-roll, I think or either you didn't shoot enough B-roll or you needed more ways to tell your story. There's plenty of other ways to tell your story. And when we were showing the road diet clip before, you saw that there were plenty of we used photos of road diets. We used graphics. We used photo sims before and after, newspaper headlines, things like that. So there's so many ways to get this stuff, and through charts and diagrams, archival footage. And if you're really good, you can do animations. I'm not that good, but we have freelanced some of our stuff out to get an animation that's really important to our films. And music. Now, music's really interesting because I've had so many people come up to me over the years, even when I was first starting, why don't you use Queen's Bicycle Races in your song, whatever. And it's like, well, if you're going to do a film that you're going to post on YouTube and maybe 100 or 200 people are going to see, you might think that that's probably fine. Although YouTube does tend to even take those down after a while once they have the music industry's search engines actually search for the music signatures, and then they'll ask you to take your video down. But we've never used any music in our films that we haven't had either permission for or we haven't bought. And if you're a first-time person making a film and you want some music, a great place to go is to musicloops.com. They've actually $35 to $70 is what they charge per selection, and that's good for life of the song and your film. And that even includes motion pictures. I've seen some of Music Loops music in motion pictures. I've seen them in plenty of commercials. Sometimes I'll be watching at home and I'll be like, oh, that commercial just used the song I used for, my Hung Zhao video or whatever it might be. So if that's the one place we go, we probably get 80% of our music there. The other 20%, friends, bands, people that send us music, people that send us soundtracks are like, if you want to use this for free, go right ahead. It's a very cheap source. $35 to $70 is not much, believe me. So I've talked about a lot of things, especially like B-roll. And this is something, I only have one example today because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we have 3 nice examples of this. This is like an edit session. This is Jan Gehl, our great icon from Copenhagen, and we love him to death. And this is a scene from our Copenhagen Slow Streets film. And what this is going to do is show you a soundbite, a 50-second soundbite, and then how we edit that down shorter, then we add video to it, then we add music. And Jan Gehl's a wonderful man, and but even he needs some editing sometimes.
And by the early 60s, it started to be really bad in the city center. And in 1962, it was decided to take the cars out of the main street of Copenhagen. It's a 1 kilometer long street. There was great debate, discussion. We are Danes, we are not Italians, it will never work. All these businesses will go broke and the weather is not good enough for being outdoors in Denmark. All this stuff was said, but it was closed anyway. And it was an instant success. People came in great numbers and started to behave Italian. And that was the start of a long trek where in small installments, improvements have been made to the pedestrian landscape, to the public spaces.
Now, you'll see now we've cut it down to almost half of what he says.
And in 1962, it was decided to take the cars out of the main street of Copenhagen. It's a 1 kilometer long street. There was great debate, discussion, will never work. All these businesses will go broke and the weather is not good enough for being outdoors in Denmark, but it was closed anyway. That was the start of a long trek where in small installments, improvements have been made to the pedestrian landscape, to the public spaces.
And now here comes the importance of B-roll. You'll see.
And in 1962, it was decided to take the cars out of the main street of Copenhagen. It's a 1 kilometer long street. There was great debate, discussion, it will never work. All these businesses will go broke and the weather is not good enough for being outdoors in Denmark, but it was closed anyway. That was the start of a long trek where in small installments, improvements have been made to the pedestrian landscape, to the public spaces.
And then I added a little music to this because there was a lot of wind interference on his mic.
And in 1962, it was decided to take the cars out of the main street of Copenhagen. It's a 1 kilometer long street. There was great debate, discussion, it will never work. All these businesses will go broke and the weather is not good enough for being outdoors in Denmark, but it was closed anyway. That was the start of a long trek where in small installments, improvements have been made to the pedestrian landscape, to the public.
So, it's funny because you got to make these choices when you're editing, and the Italian quote that he said was hysterical, and depending on what way you're editing your film, that might have been a funny break to have in it. But at this point in the film, when we were talking to him, we just wanted to show the success, the straightforwardness. We wanted to keep him on message, and so you could see when you got to make those choices. So we cut out the funny part there and some of his pauses and a couple of his asides to make it a little more efficient. And then also you could see, a big mistake that I think that some people make, especially films that are some of the big films I see in theaters. And I just saw Urbanize, which was great. But they tend to show their interviews. They'll show their interviewers for like a minute or two straight with no footage. And I think that's a big mistake because it you show. I've also seen films online where they'll interview somebody and then cut to a musical montage of 30 seconds of what they've just talked about. And it's like you can fold that all together, as you can see. You don't need to see the speaker all of the time. And in fact, it makes a more entertaining and engrossing film for, again, if somebody loves Jan Gehl and they love transportation planning, they could sit there and watch his face and him talking for hours. But, the person at home that we're trying to get more involved in these issues needs to have some eye candy, some entertainment. And so that's why we kind of do the way we do there. And here's just another example of this film I shot on the way home because somebody posted a picture on Facebook while I was on my way home with my camera gear. There's a new pedestrian and bicycle path that comes off the Queensboro Bridge in Queens that we had been waiting forever for it to officially open, but nobody would give us the date. So I saw that somebody had posted this photo and I had my camera gear with me, so I just went and shot a few clips, went home, put it to some music. 2 hours after I shot it, we had it up on Streets Blog, and it performed. I think we had like 5,000 people watch this film. But it shows you like being in the right space at the right time and knowing what people might be interested in on your blog or on your vlog does. So here, I'm just going to play it. All it is just some music and trying to get as many vantage points as I could. So riding on the new protected path, showing down low once again, from overhead, from a walkway I was able to get up on. Trying to vary what you're seeing, different people riding alongside on the roadway, showing the traffic and how the bike path is separate and these people are flowing and the cars are not moving. So again, you can make a 1 minute effective advocacy film just by thinking creatively. Now you'll see in just a minute, there's a subway line up there that runs above it. So I jumped on the subway and got a couple right there, some footage of the bike path. So, and that's all it was. It's just I spent about 20 minutes shooting this, every different angle I could think of. And people wanted to know that this was open and went out there and got it. So it's like, you can make a very effective, cheap, fast, simple film. And here's something really cool. I was just down in Guadalajara, as I mentioned, and we don't really ever get to have a lot of photos of us doing our work. And while I was down there with Gil, he took a lot of photos of me actually shooting and sent them to me. So I was like, wouldn't it be funny if I could, for this presentation, the photos up on the left and the video of what I'm shooting is actually down in the bottom right here. And just match that up so you can see why I'm doing what I'm doing. And here, I wanted to make sure I interviewed these police officers in front of the wonderful place, this fountain. Next photo. Here's a low angle shot. The kids, got the camera way down there so you could see their feet doing what they're doing. And this is, again, it's an interesting angle to people. You're not usually down there. If you shoot everything from this vantage point, it's going to get very boring very fast. Again, trying to get up overhead over the ciclovia that we were shooting. So I got up there, and this is, what I was seeing. And again, you can also, it provides more context to the event. People in the event probably don't go up there ever while they're riding it to see what it looks like. And then here's like a good job of framing somebody. And this guy actually, you can see he has his sunglasses in his hands in the left-hand corner. And he's one of the heads of Guadalajara 2020, which helps put on this event. And I said, he didn't want to take his glasses off. And I said, I need to see your face. Like if you're interviewing people at this event and like it's little 5-second soundbite, like, oh, I love being out here. Hey, that's fine if they want to keep their glasses on. But if somebody who's very important in your video, you gotta, make sure you can see them and the people can see their faces. And then when I framed it, I framed him off to the off to the left, so you could see all of the action going on when he is on camera. There's lots of people bicycling, and it's exciting. And this was a tough thing because the sun was actually off to the right. It's over here. And I would have loved to have it behind me, but you know, it's a compromise I had to make. I wanted to get these people in, so I had to have him kind of off halfway into the sun. So, you know, it's like sometimes you can, trying to follow all the rules, sometimes you got to manage the other ones to, you know, see what's the best thing you can do. And then finally, I was just going to end with a couple of publishing and marketing tips. First of all, and Ben already talked about this for Streets blog posts, you really need a catchy, effective title. And Ben, was this your title actually? Did you help us retitle this? I thought you did. No? Really? Okay. Ben is really good headline writer, so sometimes we'll ask his help before we post a film. But the biggest, baddest bike share in the world, Hangzhou, China. And this was like actually our second most viewed film last year. I think it's up to around 25,000 people have watched it now. But another thing is when you do your film now, back in the old days of YouTube, you know, you were stuck with whatever poster frame they gave you. And the poster frame is actually the frame that you see there, the representative. And sometimes that was a horrible poster frame. They picked it at random. Then they started YouTube saying, all right, you loaded up your video, you could choose from these 5 samples. And then sometimes those were horrible. But now all Vimeo, YouTube, and we as well, you can have control and load up the specific poster frame you want. And if you don't have a poster frame that is representative of what you're trying to show, you could have the best video in the world and nobody's going to watch it. So sometimes I'll do a film on a video. I'll do a video on topic, and I'll actually create my own poster frame. I'll put 2 or 3 shots in that poster frame, or I'll put some text on it, or I'll do something. I'll create my own. But most of the time you can get something cool like this. But other great titles we've had on the blog, you can see there's like, you know, some really fun ones up there. And especially for us, a little less so for Ben, but for us, since we've got one shot with our one video, you try to not only be catchy, but also to have what you need in there. And I know Ben says that he talks and puts about the politician's name or the decision maker's name. We usually, I mean, these are lengthy titles for us. So we usually try to keep it as short as we can while trying to still get the message across. The Sand Street Gets a Sassy Center Median cycle track was one of my favorites. And we also like to use alliteration whenever possible. Getting the word out, obviously, these are all kinds of websites you can load up your films to and also distribute through. But one thing I'm going to talk about in particular now is stuff I've learned with Twitter. And it's very, very important to tweet your film more than once. We put up a film and we'll probably tweet it twice that day, and then we'll tweet it the next day, then we might take a break, then we'll tweet it again. Because I don't know how many of you are on Twitter or follow Twitter here to some degree. Okay, about half people. A lot of what Twitter is, you know, just what time you check it. So if you check it in the afternoon and you've tweeted your film in the morning, they may not see it, even no matter what kind of hashtags or who you send it to. So that's important. We use Bike NYC a lot for our hashtag when it has to do with biking, but we always try to find what are the hashtags in that city or that market that we're trying to infuse. Another thing is trying to get your film in front of people that will tweet it, especially ones that have lots of followers. And for us, like that's Tree Hugger and Bikes Belong. You know, the Streets Blog Network obviously is always big for us, but Bike Portland, you know, a lot of the transportation alternatives, just lots of other people who will either do you that favor of sending it around, or if you just, you know, send them an email and say, you know, we just tweeted this, will you retweet it? And the same thing with Facebook, reposting it on Facebook. And you also need to license your video. Our films are Creative Commons. We put a license on them so that people, like if you wanted to get together 100 people in this room and watch our films and don't even tell us, that's just fine with us. But our only requirements is that nobody re-edits our films, and nobody ever makes a profit off of our films. I mean, if you want to have a fundraiser, that's fine. But if you want to sell our films, I don't know who's going to be selling them, though. I mean, but that kind of thing. Always good to thank people that have been in the video profusely, because, you know, they're doing it for free, and they're making their time for you. And another good suggestion, if you're making your own film, we always say is, you know, say some folks here in Boston, you guys had some, you know, people in Cambridge or wherever the rest, the surrounding area, maybe you have 5 or 6 people who've made some films. You know, have a street films showing party where you have some of the local films and then you show some of our films, and it'll get more people in, and you'll get more people kind of talking about the concepts that are shown in the films. And basically that's about it. I know we're probably all hungry, but that's kind of the express version of Street Films University. Thanks.
A couple questions for Clarence before we go in the other room. Yep.
We do allow it, but we just want to be notified. You know, also because, especially, you know, sometimes there is the chance for us to actually, since we are a nonprofit, to make money off of some of our footage. So some news network might call us and say, we need some footage of Ciclavia from Bogota. So we'd like to be able to charge them something for that. But, you know, if somebody's working on a project or it's their first film, or like, I need some footage of, you know, bus lanes in New York City, we'd be like, sure, go ahead. Yeah, you can just use copy. If you're just throwing it out there and anybody can do anything they want, you can use copy left. Just right at the end, you just write copy left, I think, right? Yeah, and then there's certain, if you go to Creative Commons, there's all kinds of license. You could do a Creative Commons license that's equivalent to share left, copy left, and then there's all kinds of other licenses that you can pick, and that lets people know what they can and can't do with your films.
Hey, Clarence, we should move this over into the food room. Sorry to
no, that's good.
We'll have
food.
So we can all the food is right across the hall. There's plenty of food for everybody. It'd be great.
We'll
if
be
you
there.
could stay. Yeah, Ben. We'll be there to do a little more Q&A and just informal discussion as well.
Interesting.
So please join us. And thanks a lot for coming.
A little bit.